and welcome to the Women in ERP podcast. I'm your host and community founder, Abigail Ullman, and I'm joined by my co-host, who is a major advocate for women in ERP and sales director for IFS, Stephanie Poor. Hi, Steph.
Hey, Abby.
And joining us today is Kate Waterton. Kate is the SAP Alliances lead and associate partner at EY. Kate is also the co-chair of EY Women for Alliances Communities. Welcome to work, Kate.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. For those of our listeners that aren't familiar with EY, you may have heard of Ernst & Young, a huge multinational professional services partnership employing over 312,000 people in 700 offices across 150 countries. So Kate has her work cut out. So Kate, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what life was like for you sort of growing up?
Yeah, no, of course. So I had a really idyllic, somewhat unusual childhood. I'm one of three daughters, eldest of three daughters, but shortest. I don't know why that's a chip on my shoulder. But
Weirdly, I'm the eldest of four and I'm the tallest.
Oh, I'm jealous already. But so my family, my parents were expats. So we ended up growing up in a number of different countries around the world. We were born in England, but moved to Australia, Laos, Kazakhstan, Slovakia. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. A lot of moving around, but ultimately at that young age, huge appreciation for different peoples, cultures, so on. Really learned to be very, very, very adaptable at that age as well. And viewed at a very young age to look at things as opportunities rather than challenges, because when you're thrown into the deep end and you're the new kid in class, or, you know, other people are also in expat situations and also moving on every 2 to 3 years. Yeah, you learn to live on your feet, basically. And then as part of that, I ended up leaving my family in Slovakia, and I moved to uni in the UK on my own, which was eye-opening to say the least. Met my husband after 2 weeks and ended up staying in the UK.
Oh, wow.
No idea what I wanted to do at all.
Oh my gosh. So met your husband after 2 weeks. You didn't move in with him after 2 weeks. It was just...
God, no.
Very uni.
Yeah, no, we met at uni, so grew up together in that sense. But yeah, I've been in the UK ever since. Never thought I would, considering the background that I had, and it's a similar background my dad had as well, and his dad before him. So yeah, I'm slightly changing things in that sense, but yeah, no, great experience, great background.
Do you ever get the itch to kind of move abroad and experience that again? Or quite nice having the stability and...
That's the thing. So I've got 2 young kids now. My little girl, she's in year 2. My little boy's going to be starting reception in September. So on one hand, it's kind of perfect timing. I'd love the opportunity to do that. And like I said, you learn so much. But to your point, Steph, actually growing up, maybe a little bit jealous of people that did have that experience as my husband did. You know, best friends from 2, 3 years old that he's still really in regular contact with. And it's not the same experience we had, but pros and cons.
Absolutely. So you're in the tech field, and it sounds like it was a similar kind of path to what your dad was doing. So what was your early relationship with technology like? Was a career in tech your part of your grand plan?
Well, anyone who knows me or knew me growing up, I don't think anyone would have connected me to tech, quite frankly. At all. Trouble, as I said today, connecting. But no, I mean, growing up, I think tech for me was less about my dad's job, but more about just keeping in contact, keeping connection with family and friends overseas. And so I never really made the link between tech and a career field. That said, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I think at uni, I was so unsure that I went with a pretty generic degree. I studied sociology. And even after uni, I still wasn't entirely sure. Perhaps, I mean, when it came to tech, maybe I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, didn't think I was quite clever enough for that field. I'm not sure, but it definitely wasn't a calling for me.
Yeah. So what did you think you'd be doing at this point in your life? It's a tough question.
It is. It really is. I thought I'd be traveling around. I thought I'd have a very similar expatriate, nomadic sort of lifestyle. No, and I just, I remember really, really thinking about it in the run up to leaving uni. And just so many people had their life plans. So many people knew what they wanted to do. And so many people almost had it all sorted out.
Yeah.
I have no clue. I think all I knew is that I wanted to do something purposeful, something meaningful. I remember seeing an advert whilst I was applying for basically every grad scheme going. And I saw this advert saying, do you want to make 100K in your first year? And I thought, yes, please. That sounds good. Sounds good.
That'll do.
What's the catch?
I know. What does this mean? And then that's how I accidentally fell into recruitment, where I learned that, yes, that sort of money is potentially attainable, not necessarily in your first year.
Yeah.
Just to set the expectations. Disclaimer.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember actually I was going for a few different recruitment roles, and my recruiter at the time, my rec at the time, said, Kate, you know what? This is other fast growing business that you might really be interested in. They do SAP recruitment. And I thought, God, what does that mean? Had never heard of it, had no idea, didn't even have time to research. When I tried researching, everything came up in German. And I just thought, oh, God. So as far as I was concerned, I think I winged it in the interview. Enough to get the job, thankfully, but had no idea what I was letting myself in for in terms of literally falling into SAP.
Wow.
Make it till you make it, hey?
So how many years ago did you fall into SAP in that recruitment role, and how have you managed to wind your way into your current role? Because it's quite different to recruitment.
Definitely different. I mean, there are definite links, right? Because I mean, recruitment, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about dealing with people. You learn a lot about how to deal with rejection, how you turn, again, challenges into opportunities. I ended up staying in the recruitment space for about 5-6 years, specifically SAP recruitment. But I ended up pivoting less towards the sales side and more around the account management side, because I just was really drawn to that people aspect of it all, the building of relationships and that strategic long-term value piece. And I was, again, really quite fortunate because one of my bosses or bosses at the time, he gave me a chance. He saw an opportunity. He saw an opportunity to help me progress myself. And someone who doesn't necessarily go outside my comfort zone all that often. He kind of pushed me to see the opportunity for myself as well. And so when he moved into the SAP consulting space, he was the one that picked up the phone and said, I think you have the raw attributes that you've learned from recruitment, but also, from a people perspective, to make a go of alliances. And even then I wasn't really too sure what alliances was, but there was an SAP Connect. There's, to some degree, a people-based, sales-based Connect as well. But yeah, I kind of went into it not really knowing what to expect and a little bit cautious. But yeah, since then, loved it and can't imagine a role outside of alliances.
Wow. Quite a story, quite a tale. And that's interesting that it was a man that sort of pushed you and mentored you to get into this role now. Have you found being a female a disadvantage in this career stream, or have you come across certain biases, or have you found that men have actually been quite supportive in your career?
I think about this quite a bit, actually, considering a lot of the work that I do, and then the initiatives I'm sure we'll get a chance to speak about later. But I'd still say no. I think, and definitely talk to that a little bit more. But I think when I think about my own career progression and I think back and reflect, I think the only link I could potentially make is perhaps my imposter syndrome has kind of held me back more than anything. And I appreciate that, generally speaking, people try to attribute that to being more of a female trait. But it's more than that, rather than having been a female in my field. And I said, to your point, I've had incredible, phenomenal male leaders, male mentors, people who've really put their trust and their faith in me and pushed me to challenge myself, especially when I didn't believe in myself enough. They were the ones that encouraged me. And I honestly wouldn't be where I was today without those male leaders, male mentors, and 2 or 3 to name. But when thinking about this, realistically, it wasn't really until about 8-9 years into my career I actually worked with a really standout female leader, someone who really empowered me, someone who really inspired me and made me think about my career in a totally different way, especially as a working mum, thinking about actually, can anyone do it all? But, under that mantra of, wow, she's a superwoman. She seems to be able to do everything. She was an incredible CFO. She was a mother, a trustee. She's just an incredible mentor. And she really changed how I saw being a female in my field.
Wow.
It's amazing.
So in that 8 years, did you come across many women in your field, or was that literally it?
I mean, there are many women, right, incredible team members, incredible women in tech, incredible women in recruitment, but no one necessarily stand out in terms of a leadership or mentorship role that I would necessarily point to. Purely because, I mean, we had perhaps different expectations, different ambitions, different needs, essentially. But yeah, it was just quite interesting, really, thinking about it. And maybe no one actually stood out to me as a female versus a male lead.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always really conscious of the fact that I wouldn't say lucky, because I don't think they supported me necessarily just because I was a woman in the field, but they saw, ambition or work ethic. I'm always very conscious, very thankful, very grateful to have come across those 2-3 male leaders that I've had, because, like I said, just changed the course of my career completely.
I think that is because of this age-old thing that we discuss time and time again, that women get to a certain point and then they drop out of the workforce. So you don't actually see them in those leadership positions as often. And maybe sort of years back when we all started out in our careers, that it was more prevalent then. It was male leaders and less female leaders. I think we have more today. And what have you done about that? Because you've got 2 kids. How have you managed to stay in your field and not drop out? It's really difficult. I know, I've got 3. It's a struggle every day.
It really is. And honestly, if anybody out there has all the answers, please call me. And I think that mantra of having it all, being able to do it all is flawed ultimately, right? And I think part of unpacking that makes it more possible for the rest of us. And the reason I say that is, I wouldn't say I'm lucky, because it's kind of the way it should be, but I have a great support system at home. My husband and I, we share parenting, we share household roles. I actually have the opportunity and the fortune to work 4 days a week. So I'm really lucky that EY actually supports that flexible working model really, really, really well. I have an incredible team around me. No one can do it alone ultimately, but I really make a conscious effort, not only in terms of how I try and portray myself, but also in terms of the people that I surround myself with when I look for mentors and I look for guidance. Women who are working mothers that don't claim to be able to do it all, right? If they say there are bad days and less, good days, less good days, they're being really real. They're really representing what it is actually like. So you don't have to hide behind that facade of everything being okay, because it's really difficult to juggle it all.
Yeah.
Incredibly difficult. And I think we almost put more pressure on ourselves to pretend everything's okay all the time. And if we take that role modeling concept on ourselves without putting too much pressure on ourselves, and actually unpick the fact that, it's okay to have bad days, or it's okay to drop the ball every so often, and to be supportive of each other, that's what I think makes being successful as, in my case, a working mother, and trying to, see some career progression at the same time.
Absolutely.
Authenticity, really, isn't it? In terms of just be you.
Yeah, and be visible, so people can see you. That's the thing. If we talk about your role at EY, just give us a little overview as to what you do on a daily basis for those that maybe don't understand what an alliances lead is.
Well, that would have been me not so long ago, but quite frankly. So yeah, what I would say is that no 2 days are ever the same. Alliances, when you unpick that, is very customer driven. So it's how we work with our alliance partners, whoever that might be, to drive differentiated customer value and positive, purposeful outcomes, ultimately would be the headline.
Wow.
And then you look at so from an alliance perspective, I personally look at how I can drive and promote EY-led propositions, whether that's capability-led, credentials-led, industry expertise, any of the following, into SAP. And then I ensure that our joint customers, are driving as much value as possible out of their SAP estate. But on any given day, that diary is going to be filled with calls or meetings where we talk about, account or customer-based discussions, mapping of joint initiatives, aligning our teams, identifying opportunities where we can drive value. So it's just, 2 days are never, ever the same.
Yeah. Is it quite a large alliances team, or is it just a few of you?
I'm part of a team of around, let's say, 20 that cover alliances here in the UK. But I kind of caveat that, because the real teaming definitely stretches so far beyond that, quite frankly. And it is all about that power of the team. ecosystems ultimately are just completely pivotal to transformations. And it's absolutely a case where 10 heads are better than one. So your team could consist of anything from, and I have a great team around me, people who execute that strategy, subject matter experts, industry experts, customer-facing colleagues, marketing leaders, senior stakeholders, and we're all behind driving that same purposeful message into the market.
Yeah. And the key is that, it's getting all those puzzle pieces to work well together to create that successful outcome, isn't it?
It's not easy, but yeah, makes it fun.
No, absolutely not. With regards to SAP then, or any ERP vendor that EY works with, in an alliance aspect, what are you responsible for with regards to, say, SAP, which is your vendor? Is that the relationship itself? Is it SAP's customers? Just give us a bit of an overview of as to what you do in that regard.
Well, one of my leaders says it best, actually, and she says ultimately our role is to be the curator of value. So it's elements of all of that. So absolutely, in terms of driving the strategic direction of that relationship between ourselves and SAP, that's a lot of exec mapping, for example, and really drilling down and making sure as with any customer relationship, I view SAP as my customer. You know who they are, you know how they work, you know what they want to, what their strategy is. And then there's elements of how you drive joint initiatives, joint go-to-market, so that you're really driving that value piece for your customers. And then it's that long-term value piece as well. It's not just about today, this week, next year. It's many, as you said, many moving puzzle pieces.
And many hats.
Yeah, exactly. And just making sure that it's all ticking along, because, as I said, from a teaming perspective, there are so many incredible people, so many bright people that can add so much value to every single discussion. It's just making sure that keeps, driving that progress along and making sure we're getting that real outcome that we're all striving for.
So you're co-chair of the EMEA Women for Alliances community. You haven't sort of faced adversity in the traditional sense, I suppose. I mean, we all have as women generally, but in your career, you've had a lot of male support. So why was this community established, and sort of how did you get involved with it? What's your driver to help other women?
As you said, I think I'm fortunate to have not felt like I've been disadvantaged to be a woman in my field as of yet, but at the same time, very conscious that in a lot of settings, I have been, and I know it's such a thrown out phrase, the only woman at the table.
Yeah.
Which isn't right? We're looking for as much diversity as possible. And as a mum, that's what I'm looking for my children as well, right? In the next generation of talent. When we started actually, and again, incredible teams, I can absolutely not take all credit for this, because we've got amazing co-chair teams, exec sponsors around the EMEA Women for Alliances initiative. But we looked at it in two different ways. On one hand, the fact that women were still consistently being the only women at the tables in alliance-led conversations. And so therefore like a real opportunity with great support to create a community intent on changing that. And this is all internally focused. But then secondly as well, a lot of people, again, myself included, didn't really understand what alliances are about. And even as recently as about 2-3 years ago, there are still people who don't quite necessarily understand the value driver behind that role. So we really saw an opportunity again to open up, whether it be to women, to male, but mostly to women, the opportunity for a new career path, a career path that drives real value, real growth for any organization. You might not have seen this, but EY led a really, really fascinating study last year. And apparently, actually now 71% of business leaders now believe ecosystems are pivotal and important to their company's success. Wow. So that the career path for alliances has also changed significantly. So personally, when I take a look at that, to bring as many women into the alliances space as possible would be wonderful. And B, how we can kind of create more female-led opportunities, more female opportunities, empower as many women into the alliances space as possible, or women who are currently in alliances, was just such a huge opportunity, one that couldn't be missed.
What does the action look like then? How do you do that? How do we do that?
Well, we've mentioned it already, really. It's that visibility, it's that role modeling, it's really standing up and kind of getting your voice heard. So we focus on being a community rather than a network. And that's not to say that networks aren't incredibly powerful, but when we think about community, it's all about interaction, active involvement, a place for learning, a place for sharing, almost a safe space.
Yeah.
In this hybrid working world, we have the ability to do that on a virtual scale across a region. And And then what we really try and do is we use this opportunity, not only through our exec sponsorship, but our access to customers, our access to each other, to really empower and give access to really fantastic and inspirational women, internally and externally. And they all have incredibly different experiences, perspectives, and have all paved their own very successful career paths in very different ways. And having that visibility, having that role modeling, and kind of hearing that, you're not alone, or if you're feeling a bit vulnerable, if you're feeling like you have imposter syndrome, oh my goodness, that CEO mentioned that she might have had an imposter syndrome. It just changes the playing field significantly, and it helps you think about your career progression in a very different way.
Yeah, it does.
So
And we spoke previously about some of the events that you've held, and you've had a couple of quite important guest speakers, such as Melissa Di Donato, who Steph knows quite well, from SUSE. And Cindy Rose from Microsoft. Serious, like real female role models that are actively trying to change the world. Do you find that these events are well received and that women come away from them with a real sense of purpose and drive?
Absolutely. I mean, as not only part of the team that helps organise it, but a member, someone who sits back and listens. Honestly, the feedback is ultimately the reason why we can continue to do this. It's amazing, and it's incredible. Melissa herself, I'm a huge fan. Almost 2 years ago, actually, and I still think about this and I still quote it constantly. You cannot be what you cannot see. And the fact that we have people standing up and talking about their experiences and empowering and inspiring our community, that's what makes a difference, because they're talking about their career paths. And these aren't necessarily just the powerhouses you've mentioned, but these are also colleagues, peers, all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of roles and ranks within the business. Their shared experiences, their shared lessons, their learnings are so important to making you realize, A, you're part of a team, part of a community, but B, that there are so many different tracks to success, and anything that you might think is too difficult to overcome most likely has been overcome by someone else that can talk to that experience and how they overcame it. So many incredible female leaders, peers, colleagues.
Yeah, and really authentic women as well, because I know you mentioned to me about Melissa's speech that she gave, and she was very aware of the fact that she had privilege to a degree, and support to be where she is. And a lot of us don't have that, but I think it's really important that she does call that out. It exists everywhere.
Yeah. So Cindy Rose, she mentioned about, your responsibility to pull up that next generation. And Hani Eskabax, who's our exec sponsor, and she's incredible, talks about empowerment and talks about being visible and talks about how important it is to inspire each other. And incredible powerhouse women. But to caveat that as well, like I said, we've got incredible members from all sorts of backgrounds, all levels of experience, whether that be junior or senior, and they all play their role in inspiring everyone. It's just an incredibly empowering and fulfilling community to be a part of, and it makes such a huge difference. And it's one that I almost wish I'd had at the beginning of my career.
I was just about to say that, in terms of if you go back 10, 15 years ago, if someone asked me about ERP, I wouldn't know, what are you talking about? I don't know what that means. Like, it's so true, because you only know what you know, and if you don't see it, then how could you possibly know it exists, and therefore know, it goes back to right at the beginning when we were discussing, what did you want to be when you grew up? I mean, I still can't answer that question at 40 years old, but
I still do not know what I want to be when I grow up. I've never known.
I look at my nieces, what are they, 6 and 4 now, and at that age, again, seeing successful women, it gives them a whole new dimension to then start exploring and kind of, understanding what would excite me moving forward. My options are not limited to being a nurse, a hairdresser, do you know what I mean? It's just, you plant it in their minds, and like you say, inspire the next generation. It's so important.
The lesson that I've really taken from all this in the past 3 years is, so it's not exactly in my comfort zone. I'm quite an introverted person at home, but that notion of responsibility and action. If we think about International Women's Day, and the concept of embracing equity, it's not just words. You have to show action, right? And even if I might feel a little bit uncomfortable about putting myself out there in terms of being visible and standing up and saying some things, when I'd rather shy away, I think it's just so important to be that visible representative role model to people around you, and just show, to our point before, in terms of, juggling a work-life balance as a working parent, maybe there are hard days, less hard days, but also this is what I've achieved, this is what I've learned. And I think if we had more representation, if we had more visibility, more authenticity as well, it makes such a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. And for your daughter, would you encourage her to go into this field?
I think, bless her, she's an absolute powerhouse. I would support any career choice she made as long as she was passionate about it. But now taking a look at that technology, I can't think of a more exciting sector, quite frankly, whether that be in alliances, whether that be across the tech sector. But what other sector can you think of? What other field can you think of that has limitless boundaries? Ultimately, the innovation side of things, just the level of people that you're dealing with, the opportunity for continuous learning.
Yeah.
I'd be a huge advocate for anyone joining the tech sector, and it's never too late for anyone to join, ultimately.
Do you think our education system is geared up to support that vision and that dream of what tech could be for somebody? Do you find that it's there in schools yet?
I think we've come a long way.
Yeah.
I do think we've come a long way. I think there is still definite leaps to be made. I do feel that the women in STEM piece is definitely being advocated more and more and more. And I think that, my daughter, for example, she's obsessed with Greta Thunberg and Marie Curie, and she loves the idea of, the role that women have to play in really making a difference and changing the world. Whether she's necessarily looking at that through a tech lens yet, I'm not too sure, but she's 7. There's definitely time.
Yeah.
But I think more could be done. That's my responsibility as a parent as well. More can be done in terms of, I know people who encourage their kids to go on junior coding courses. And I think my daughter would love to do that. Absolutely. It's just how we encourage outside of the education space, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about giving back, isn't it, to the community as well? When we're at the point that we are in our careers, how are we inspiring the next generation? And it's trying to think of ideas around that as well. Like, should we be going into schools and talking about what we do?
Well, my 4-year-old at nursery, they had a careers week, and I asked him. I said, "Harry, would you like me to come in and talk? Because I don't. You just sit at a computer all day, mummy." So,
dismissed.
That's pretty impressive, though. A careers week for 4-year-olds.
Wow,
like that is pretty cool.
They had a scientist come in. He was very proud because they managed to touch a fossil. So I'm not too sure if I can make my job seem as glamorous as that to a 4-year-old, but I'm trying. I'm definitely trying.
I mean, you did it recently, didn't you, Steph? You had a CSR day with IFS?
We've done a couple with schools, and it's interesting. As you were just talking, I was thinking a lot of the school stuff really is postcode related as well. So the school that we've been working with, they literally just don't have computers. Like we make a donation to the school as a company to support that, so they actually have a tech team or tech room. But yeah, it's you talk about privilege and kind of all that kind of it totally exists.
The socio-economic divide, yeah, it's really there.
Yeah, and for all the wrong reasons, as we know. And it's how do you inspire those kids? It's hard.
Yeah.
But to your point around should we be talking to schools, absolutely, because again, if they don't know about it, how can they possibly aspire to be in that sector? And whether they're boys or girls, really.
Yeah, oh, for sure. We think about how early years, just how much development's made, and how much we can positively impact at that point, not only as parents but as teachers. More can and should be done, but I do feel like we've come some way on the same side.
Yeah, agreed.
Absolutely. Well, we will let you go now, Kate. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a really good conversation, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you very much, Kate. Bye.